are so focused on their health condition when they come into the hospital that sometimes, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I'm gonna have to figure out how to vote. That doesn't hit them until the next day. And then they're scrambling.
We have the people that are like, I'm going now. I'm tired of being trapped. I'm going now.
People are looking not just to travel, but to travel in a big way, in a memorable way, in a special way.
Not everyone can physically get to a polling place this election. To help change that, a group of nonpartisan medical professionals is helping patients cast their votes from their hospital beds.
A patient telling me that they would rather leave and risk their life to go vote. That was like very emotional to me.
As an emergency medical resident physician and alumni of Brown University, Dr. Kelly Wong has spent her life helping others physically. Now, during this presidential election, she's pivoting and also helping others politically.
We wanted to make a place where patients, family members, healthcare providers could all access this information really easily.
Wong is the founder of Patient Voting, a nonpartisan, volunteer-based group of medical professionals helping patients vote from hospitals.
And it really came to mind during the last presidential election in 2016, I had patients saying they would rather leave the hospital than stay so that they could go vote.
How patients vote by emergency absentee ballot is very different in every state. That's why Wong says informing patients about their rights is absolutely critical to get their votes counted.
They are so focused on their health condition when they come into the hospital that sometimes, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I'm gonna have to figure out how to vote. That doesn't hit them until the next day. And then they're scrambling.
Patient Voting has volunteers nationwide, and this website gets up to 300 hits a day. A somewhat small number, though political science experts say it could have a big impact.
2000, it came down to 600 votes difference in Florida.
Dr. Robert Prowse is the chair of the political science department at MSU Denver. He says the ability to allow people to exercise their right to vote and facilitate that under extreme conditions, like being in the hospital, is completely legal, and it's also crucial for some to have their voices heard.
It's really hard, of course, to get out of a hospital bed and go down to a poll. In order to allow people to vote, this is an organization and these laws are in place in order to facilitate that.
So yesterday after my shift, I went upstairs and I helped somebody fill out the application. I kind of talked them through the different options and saw what them and their family wanted to do.
Dr. Wong says the money to fund this patient voting comes through a grant from Brown Emergency Medicine. A price, she says, is well worth the investment during this political season.
They shouldn't have to choose between their health or their right to vote.
I'm Kai Beach reporting.
We know COVID-19 can have a harder impact on people with pre-existing conditions, but could just getting the coronavirus become a pre-existing condition? The Supreme Court is preparing to hear a case that could change how insurers cover such conditions. The U.S. remains in the grip of the coronavirus pandemic, with 8 million cases and spiking in multiple states.
There are many, many people not taking this seriously and not playing their part.
Now there are concerns that getting COVID-19 could land you in the same category as someone with diabetes or high blood pressure, having a pre-existing condition.
This has flown under the radar to some extent.
Eric Schneider is with the Commonwealth Fund, which researches health policy. Because COVID-19 can have lingering effects on people who contract it, Schneider says there's a possibility it could be labeled as a pre-existing condition. So who decides that?
The pre-existing condition language really traces to the insurance industry. Really on a case-by-case basis, which diseases, which conditions will actually count.
That hasn't mattered lately because the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, prohibits health insurers from denying people coverage based on pre-existing conditions. But next month, a case before the Supreme Court could get Obamacare thrown out. If that happens, there is no official plan yet from either party to replace it, nor to protect people with pre-existing conditions.
If the Supreme Court undoes that solution, there will definitely be a need for a new solution.
How many could be affected? The Department of Health and Human Services says about 133 million people in the U.S. currently have a pre-existing condition. The Commonwealth Fund looked at how COVID-19 survivors would affect that number, excluding people who already had a pre-existing condition and anyone over the age of 65. researchers found 3.4 million new people who recovered from the coronavirus could join the ranks of having a pre-existing condition. It's a number growing, they found, by 20,000 a day.
That number is also tied to how well we control the pandemic.
So far, no insurance company has indicated it will add COVID-19 as a potential pre-existing condition. But healthcare policy experts warn it could all come down to what the justices decide about the healthcare law in next month's case. In Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
As hospitals are gearing up for a COVID surge and a possible twindemic, many are relying on traveling nurses. Those nurses travel from hotspot to hotspot, caring for patients and making sure hospitals are fully staffed.
They're probably going to send me to the emergency room.
Grover Street is a traveling nurse specializing in trauma and intensive care.
I worked in over 100 hospitals, and I've worked in probably 15 different states.
This year, he's been in New York, Miami, California. He hops all over the country doing 4-week assignments for crisis nursing and COVID relief. Busy and intense, barely describe what he's experienced on the front lines.
I like going to the hot zones and really learning about this virus and learning about the different patients and, just human functionality, the way people think about this whole process, because it's something that's probably never going to happen in my lifetime again.
Well, interesting from a scientific standpoint, he admits it's natural to be afraid of this virus that has taken over our world.
I've worked with nurses that their families died, the nurse died, and I worked with a physician, he died. This is real, and I've been on the front line since it started, and it's kind of sad to know that a lot of people aren't wearing masks and social distancing.
He says he prefers the traveling nurse aspect of his profession, more flexibility, and he says it's better pay. A former trauma nurse in the military, it's a lot like a deployment, except this time he's being sent to a different type of war zone.
New York is starting to pick back up. Florida's started to pick back up. And I'm getting texts and emails every day. Am I ready to go somewhere else as soon as this assignment ends?
Do you ever sit and scramble and think, how are we going to fulfill this need? Are you ever short on the nursing front?
It's really never a matter of how are we going to do it, it's at what scale.
Lauren Pasquale Bartlett is the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Fast Staff Travel Nursing, the agency for whom Grover works.
At this time last year, we had about 3,000 nurses on assignment. Right now, we've got about 6,000.
Traveling nurses, she says, have been backfilling hospitals for 30 years.
And really came out of the strike business. When nurses were unionizing and going on strikes, they needed replacement nurses. And so the hospitals started bringing in these travel nurses to replace those striking nurses.
They answer the call when there's hurricanes, fires, intense flu seasons, and the coronavirus. Except, unlike those other short-lived events, there doesn't seem to be an end in sight.
I know everybody's tired of what's going on and they're ready to get back out there, go shopping, have parties, and do what you do. But we need to control this before you die or your family member dies, and then it's too late. So just stay safe.
Grover says the difference between responses in each state is fascinating. He's looking forward to a bit of R&R before his next assignment and says his only wish is that everyone does their part by washing hands and wearing a mask to help protect medical staff and each other. I'm Stephanie Stone, reporting.
Many mental health facilities were closed earlier this year due to the pandemic, so therapists had to find new ways to reach their patients. Now patients can connect with their providers with a simple click of a button.
Bringing your attention to the breath.
This small black device is a biofeedback device.
Face, neck, and shoulders to release.
They're really visually able to see, okay, this is actually working and calming me down. And then secondarily, for our therapists, it allows them another data point to watch what their patient's doing.
It's just one of the tools in the toolbox for mental health therapists to better connect with and understand their patients without meeting in person.
It allows us and the therapist to take their patient through exercises of deep breathing and heart rate variability, and shows visually within our app and the Bluetooth connection we have how their deep breathing is having a positive impact.
Brett Shrewsbury is with Maru Health.
We really built a program that solely is to treat depression and anxiety effectively, right? So there's the self-care and digital content, and it's guided by that licensed therapist that's taking the patient through.
They work with a number of companies and health plans, one of them being the Mental Health Center of Denver.
Our goal was to meet people where they are, and they're on these screens.
Aliris Ullman works at the center.
Part of our digital capabilities include the text messaging. Then we also have curated resources which people can go and explore on their own. People that we serve get the opportunity to have all of these digital capabilities at their fingertips.
This comes at a time where taking care of your mental health is more important than ever. 78% of Americans say coronavirus is a significant source of stress. More than 1 in 3 adults have reported symptoms of anxiety or depression during the pandemic, up from 11% last year.
The demand is increasing day over day, and especially the longer this pandemic happens, the more demand and the more acceptable it is for people to reach out, which creates more of a demand.
But with the use of technology, centers like this one can help meet that rising demand.
Looking at our total toolkit, technology is an important means to become a force multiplier.
Wes Williams is with the center. He says they went from 5 to 4,000 telehealth sessions a week in a 1-week transition. However, it will take more than telehealth sessions to expand the number of people they can help.
Therapists can still only see 5 or 6 patients a day, even through teletherapy, right? Whereas through our program, where they're texting back and forth more than they're doing the face-to-face sessions, we're able to right now scale almost 6 times scalability.
Mental health centers are experimenting with more possibilities to help reach people where they're at.
Everyone realized that there's a need in mental health, and I think people are starting to bring innovation in.
I'm Chloe Nordquist reporting.
A unique and innovative approach to public health is getting both national and international attention for the creative ways in which they're reaching underserved communities. HipHop Public Health has a variety of campaigns, music, and topics, but their most recent release has to do with salt. Sound familiar?
Let's talk about salt, baby.
You might recognize the song, but this time, instead of Let's Talk About Sex, this is Let's Talk About Salt, starring the Grammy-winning Cheryl Salt James from the musical group Salt and Peppa. The song is focused on preventing hypertension, which has a lot to do with, you guessed it, salt.
The reality is most people consume way too much salt. Salt is ubiquitous in the American diet.
And this would be the hip-hop doc.
I still haven't fully embraced it, but, it is a fun name. And I think that for me, whatever I can do to really further the cause, to inspire, young children to be healthy, I would embrace any moniker for that.
Dr. Olajide Williams is a neurologist, public health expert, professor at Columbia University, chief of staff of neurology at Columbia University. As if that wasn't enough on his plate, he's also the founder of HipHop Public Health.
I started it because of the tremendous disparities and inequities that kind of flood communities of color.
He says to effect systemic change, we need a multi-layered approach, which has a lot to do with communication.
Information, adequate, effective information, doesn't penetrate a lot of our marginalized communities of color sufficiently enough, effectively enough to enable, ignite, inspire behavior change.
He says there are often problems with the credibility of the messenger. So Dr. Williams developed a model in which hip-hop icons deliver messages. People are drawn to the music, which then connects them to the information. Hypertension prevention is just one of their missions. They've promoted inclusion,
step to the left,
fought childhood obesity with Special Olympics, and this past spring,
wash your hands, everybody, and everybody.
They released 20 seconds or more to empower youth with accurate information about COVID-19.
Have you seen or have you noticed that it's worked? Have you seen a difference in people in the community or kids or whatever your target audience is for that particular campaign? Have you noticed a difference?
We're hearing from schools all around the country and in fact all around the world about how habits are changing.
CEO and Executive Director of HipHop Public Health, Lori Rose Benson, says their hand-washing song was used at an international school in India.
We have a very, very strong infrastructure in terms of connecting with school communities. So we work very closely with school districts all around the country, from New York City to Seattle to West Palm Beach, Florida, and Boston.
All of the resources are free, and their reach is crafted towards the platforms in which youth would engage: YouTube, websites, social media. According to a 2017 stat from the American Heart Association, African Americans were 20% more likely to die from heart disease, and African American women are 60% more likely to have high blood pressure. And affecting change, Dr. Williams says, starts with our youth.
We know that knowledge is power, and when you're empowered to by knowledge, you can change your behaviors, or you can operate a certain way. And sometimes these behavior changes could be the difference between life and death.
Culturally tailored communications to make a difference, which will hopefully have a huge impact on all of our futures. I'm Stephanie Stone, reporting.
Had enough of the non-stop flood of political text messages leading up to Election Day? Americans will get texted a whopping 3 billion political texts before the election, but there are ways to avoid them. First, you can filter your texts on your smartphone. iPhone and Android phones both have a feature in settings that allows you to filter unknown senders. This sorts messages from people who aren't on your contact list. You can also choose to opt out. You have to be opting out of texts from a person working for a campaign, according to Federal Communications Commission guidelines. That's because text messages generated through auto-dialing are illegal and fall under the same rules as robocalls. Also, most political texts give you the option to reply stop or unsubscribe to stop receiving messages. As for how they got your number, all states allow access to voter data for election purposes, but that doesn't mean they're allowed to abuse the information. The FCC encourages you to report messages that don't follow the rules by filing a complaint. You can also forward the unwanted text to 7726 or spam.
The travel industry is trying new tactics to recover from financial stress. Experts say new deals are emerging that allow people to go on a trip of their dreams through 2022.
We quickly realized that the number one factor that helped incentivize travel planning, travel booking, even if it would be for 6, 12, 18 months down the road, was this high sense of flexibility. And so we came up with this concept of putting out and working with hundreds and thousands of travel partners to really come up with these very attractive, aggressively priced offers, but that were fully refundable and that had these very long travel windows.
Gabe Saglier is the senior editor of the site Travel Zoo, which facilitates travel deals around the country. Saglier says when COVID hit, the industry came to a screeching halt. But through surveys of its 15 million members, Travel Zoo soon found people were still willing to book, but mostly for future trips, and not just any trip.
People are looking not just to travel, but to travel in a big way, in a memorable way, in a special way. And so we've been putting out these offers that in some cases are to destinations that I think pre-COVID may not have been on people's radar, these sort of far-flung, bucket list-worthy destinations.
Aaron Campus, co-founder of the social media travel site Travevel, says the pent-up demand for travel is showing in different ways.
We're seeing two extremes. Like when we look in groups, forums, in different areas, we have the people that are like, I'm going now. I'm tired of being trapped. I'm going now. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to wear my mask. It's going to be what it's going to be. And then we have the people that are, oh, I just booked for 2022 or 2023.
Campus says pre-pandemic, people generally booked a year or less in advance. Now they're seeing people either book a trip in the next 30 days or 2 years from now.
Are you seeing that being more flexible in the travel industry going forward?
What I think it is, I don't think it's so much about the flexibility. I think it's get someone to book.
TravelZoo says the help in cash flow is certainly good for the longevity of the industry.
There is this infusion of traveler cash now that is helping a lot of these companies, a lot of our travel partners that are looking to keep as many employees on the books as possible, bring back as many employees as quickly as possible. That is certainly an infusion that's important there, and it helps the industry navigate through these next couple of months until we are on the other side of this.
As for how long these flexible travel deals will be around, experts aren't too sure. As soon as life gets back to normal and regular travel resumes, the deals could be gone. But if you're wanting to book these deals and possibly change the dates later, Travel says pay attention to the fine print, as some may increase the prices if you adjust your date of travel. I'm Jessica Parrish reporting.
People are coming together to try and fight the pandemic. A company in Florida is trying to use jellyfish to help experts identify the coronavirus in the air.
The jellyfish is the component of the sensor that basically makes the cell emit light when a pathogen from the air is connected to it or binds to it.
Researchers are still in the testing process. Scientists in California are working on a possible treatment of a disease that causes organ failure, but their early research shows it may also help in the fight against coronavirus.
They can be used to bind to the virus and then neutralize the virus. So now the virus loses the infectivity to the host cells.
Researchers say the trial period may take too long for the possible treatment to be used during the current coronavirus pandemic. From science to history, a Texas professor is rewriting the lost history of black composers back into our world today. A lot of times, black musicians are spotlighted in jazz and gospel, but Dr. Horace Maxwell is working to showcase those who composed classical music.
The main thing that I've learned is no composer can fit into a bottle.
Dr. Maxwell says he'll always try to highlight those lost composers because it's important to keep their music alive for the world to hear.
Black folks are still fighting. It's time for a change, man. So it's good that they're trying to get them to vote.
We don't have to riot. We don't have to do it the bad way. We can go to the polls, and we can do it the democratic way.
A friend of mine calls this holiday season Shipageddon. What I think it means for shoppers is if you see something you want, I would buy it now, stick it under the tree.
All eyes are on the presidential showdown on Election Day. But just as important is control of the Senate. Just a few seats could change the balance of power in Washington. On November 3rd, the top prize will be the White House, but around the country there are 35 Senate seats up for grabs.
Republicans control the U.S. Senate by just 3 seats right now. And there are a number of very close races, particularly where you have Republican incumbents trying to defend their seats in states that are pretty competitive.
Seth Maskett is a political science professor. He also runs the Center for American Politics.
There's a decent chance Democrats get enough seats to take control very narrowly of the Senate, but honestly, there's enough races on kind of the knife's edge here that this could really go either way.
Several different organizations are tracking the Senate race across the country. The model used by newspaper magazine The Economist has 4 races that appear to be a toss-up: Iowa, South Carolina, and both seats in Georgia. But which races are close? It really depends on who you ask.
North Carolina is looking very close right now.
I look at Michigan. I think John James represents the GOP's best opportunity for a pickup.
Montana's potentially very close. Iowa's potentially very close.
The race up in Maine's a very interesting place. Unless something incredible happened. Doug Jones is gone. Tuberville should be able to take that without a lot of trouble. And I still think the Montana one's a little bit up in the air.
Robert Cahaley is the lead pollster for the Trafalgar Group and one of the few pollsters who saw a path for victory for President Trump in 2016. He says one Senate race to keep an eye on is in Minnesota.
If there's a massive, massive Trump wave, and that means like a hit, a large turnout that nobody's expecting, hidden vote that exceeds 5%, keep your eye on the Minnesota Senate seat.
Another huge race, Lindsey Graham's attempt to stave off challenger Jamie Harrison in South Carolina.
Jamie Harrison, he has already raised more money than any Senate candidate in U.S. history.
But he'll need more than money to flip a Republican stronghold.
Jamie Harrison, there's just far too much footage of him with Nancy Pelosi and talking about Hillary Clinton. It's very difficult.
Graham has enough advantages in the polling that he'll probably pull that one out. It probably won't flip, but it's a narrow enough margin that it's fair to consider it competitive.
While control of the presidency is paramount for both parties, it is hard to get things done without cooperation from Congress.
Control of the Senate is important simply because, for legislative purposes, if Joe Biden becomes president, and Democrats continue to control the House of Representatives, which looks very likely, he will, Biden would have some ability to pass an agenda.
For both parties, it means being able to control some of the issues most important to Americans right now.
That includes things like coronavirus relief. It includes any sort of healthcare expansion, any sort of economic plans, any sort of environmental plans. So control of the Senate may just hinge on a couple of seats, but that can make a big difference.
I'm Bo Evans reporting.
It's one of the most controversial aspects of politics, gerrymandering. That's the process of mapping out districts for political representation in Congress and state legislatures. It happens every 10 years and is based on population results from the census. But it's highly politicized. Now, some new solutions could change all that, including the use of artificial intelligence. One of the most contentious battles in politics isn't just the current battle for the White House. It's also the upcoming fight over redistricting.
The basic idea underlying that system is that we should form a constituency with people who live near us.
New congressional district maps are created based on census population numbers every 10 years. But those maps can end up getting distorted to favor one political party over another in a process known as gerrymandering.
I think gerrymandering is of concern to most voters because it seems to violate the foundational principle of our representative system.
Some of the unusual congressional maps can look downright, animal. There's Maryland's Democratic 3rd District, which looks like a snake. And there's Northern Ohio's Republican 4th District, known as the Duck. So who designed these?
The Constitution gives the power to state legislatures to draw these maps.
And since politicians generally draw the maps, they can be skewed to favor a particular party or incumbent. But it can also favor people from a particular racial or ethnic group who have often been underrepresented in the halls of power. In Virginia, voters will decide this November if an independent commission should be in charge of the process instead. And there are other ideas emerging too, like using artificial intelligence.
And it takes an enormous computer capacity, which was not there 30 years ago.
Bruce Kane of Stanford University says he and a colleague created an algorithm that could help create fairer maps.
You want to be able to do is take every plan and classify it and say, yeah, this one's better for minorities, this one's better for, compactness. But is there something that combines both of them?
All part of the ongoing effort to make sure America's representative democracy remains truly representative of the people. In Washington, I'm Maya Rodriguez.
African-American voter turnout declined for the first time in 20 years during the last presidential election. This time, a group of black men is working to change that one step and one vote at a time. This election season, Demetrius Short is hustling to get his people to the polls. using physical fitness to inspire political change. Short is the founder and CEO of the Transformation Life Center and Steps of Success 5K. Nonprofits mentoring youth living in underserved communities. During this presidential election, Short and his team are reaching out to college students from Fisk University, a private historically black college in Nashville, Tennessee. Recent Fisk graduate Miles Harris is motivated to get more members of African-American communities to have their voices heard and their votes counted. Many members in the local African-American community do understand the importance of this election and are calling this political movement inspiring. According to the Pew Research Center, the black voter turnout rate declined in 2016, falling to 59.6%, after reaching a record high 66.6% in 2012. That's a trend Short wants to change. Not by swaying young people's votes, but through politics, one step and one vote at a time. I'm Kai Beach reporting.
The challenges of this year will continue along the Gulf Coast long after 2020. Louisiana has felt the impact of 2 hurricanes in less than 2 months. We went to Lake Charles to see how the work of those already on the front lines of a pandemic has become even more essential.
I felt like I'd come to a third world country when we came back.
In the debris that still litters Lake Charles, elementary school art teacher Pam Abshire
Being very careful.
is searching for lessons.
I like to do an art project with my kids, so this is something they can hang on to. And never in a million years I would have thought those windows would have blown out.
This year has proven Mother Nature knows how to challenge those who live in places like the Gulf Coast.
We have tens of thousands of Louisianans today who are hurting.
Last week, Hurricane Delta brought flooding, wind, and more pain to those like Pam, still trying to clean up after Category 4 Hurricane Laura changed the Lake Charles landscape in August.
Lake Charles has been demolished. I mean, there's no better way to put it.
The pain is personal for Dr. Tyson Green. Hurricane Laura left his home unlivable.
As soon as I pulled up and I saw that, one side of my house was completely blown in and, the garage doors had been blown out.
While his family evacuated before that storm, he stayed behind to be with his patients.
As a physician, you're worried about the patients that you just did surgery on. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to end up?
Dr. Green doesn't know where his family of 6 will call home next.
Every day you're finding something new. Whether it's with insurance, you got to submit this, you got to do this, but at the same time, your job doesn't stop. We go back to work immediately.
Right now, he's raising thousands of dollars for the nurses and staff still fighting on the front lines of the pandemic, who lost everything in the storms.
What happens when the dust settles and we're not talking about it anymore?
Luckily, we missed all the damage and debris that were flying in. Provided, toilet paper, essentials, meat, cleaning supplies, and etc. But it hit us financially pretty bad.
Like many business owners this year, for Jason Michalski, the pandemic has been a fight. Hurricane Laura knocked his power out for a month. His lights are now back on. But for many others here, they'll stay dark.
A lot of businesses that are local staples are just gone.
The people of Lake Charles may wonder why Mother Nature chose them.
You just trust in God that He's going to take care of things.
But for those still sifting through the rubble, Rebuilding is less about why and more about what you can learn on the journey to recovery.
Picking up the pieces and going forward. So that's what we're going to do.
In Lake Charles, Louisiana, I'm Chris Stewart reporting.
Start your holiday shopping early. That's the advice from retailers and logistics experts. Like everything else in 2020, this season will be like no other. You can expect delays, out of stock items, and missed deadlines.
They're scanned, we choose what shipping service we use, and then we stack it all on pallets.
That's David Bolotsky you hear. He's the founder and CEO of Uncommon Goods, and he's walking us through the warehouse.
We basically connect independent artists and designers and makers with customers who are looking to express their individuality through the products they buy.
The Brooklyn-based company was at the epicenter of the pandemic and had to shut down for 3 months. Then, when everyone started shopping again, they did well being an online retailer. And now they and many other businesses are encouraging people to get started on their shopping. No need to wait for Black Friday. In fact, they're warning people to start before Thanksgiving. Like now.
Demand has been strong, and a friend of mine calls this holiday season Ship-ageddon. You know, concern about what's going to happen in the transportation network.
He says the supply chain will be limited.
What I think it means for shoppers is if you see something you want, I would buy it now. Stick it under the tree.
What are those trucks doing? Where are all the delivery trucks?
Wow. All the delivery trucks are out and they are busy. You may not have heard of it, but there is sort of a shortage going on right now. They're calling it a capacity crunch. But essentially, there's not enough drivers, there's not enough trucks, there's not enough warehouses right now, because through all of the things that the pandemic has done for us, we've all started shopping online more and more and more, and no one could have anticipated it.
Kirsten Newbold-Knipp is the chief growth officer at Convey, a technology company that helps retailers with on-time deliveries. Logistics and shipping is her expertise.
We help them think about, what are the trucks doing? What are the packages doing? What's happening with on-time delivery? What kind of damage is happening? So that they can give consumers the best possible delivery experience, whether it's the holidays or not.
This year, holiday gifts will undergo a true supply and demand issue, magnified by a pandemic and already backfilled orders. Add in staffing made difficult by things like social distancing, and we've got problems.
The other thing that is happening right now that a lot of consumers don't think about is that the actual warehouse space to be able to fulfill orders is limited. They might not have the inventory, and so fulfillment times are delaying, which means just the pick and pack piece is taking longer and the trucking piece is taking longer.
She says consumers need to think ahead, have a backup plan, look for alternatives, use multiple retailers, shop locally, and sign up for text alerts.
Only about 5% of consumers are signing up for SMS alerts. But by regulation, a retailer can't spam you. They're only allowed to send you a transactional note via text.
She also says the things that tend to sell out are the items that don't have much variation. TVs, toys, specific electronics.
If we see the kind of growth at Christmas that we've seen the last few months, we could be looking at 50% growth over last year in terms of online demand.
He recommends having Santa come early and hide those items until the big day. I'm Stephanie Stone, reporting.
A young app developer is helping kids with special needs all over his school district. The Indiana district's head of remote learning recognized some students who need extra help while learning from home can't necessarily afford a tutor. Some of the teachers recommended she turn not to a fancy app developer, but to one of the high school juniors. You could call him a coding wizard.
I actually
started making apps while I was still in elementary school.
Together, they made the Blending Board. It's a free app that helps English as a second language students and those with dyslexia sound out syllables to improve their reading.
So like if you're doing a Zoom call or a Google Meet, then an instructor can actually pull up the app and be rapidly going through the Blending Board with the child when they're doing a small group situation.
Parents can also scan a QR code to help their kids practice at home. The young Blending Board developer says he's happy to be a part of the solution.
I mean, I was really excited about it because I remember a lot of the teachers that I'm going to be helping with this. So it's like the teachers that I loved, I get to like give a little back to.
Giving back to the tune of more than 250,000 downloads so far. As we deal with the stress of the election, there's an ancient practice that can make us feel more relaxed. A journalist is shedding new light on the lost art of breathing.
My name is James Nestor. I am the author of the book Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art.
James Nestor has written for many publications, including the New York Times, National Public Radio, and Scientific American. For the past decade, he's been traveling the world talking with top breathing experts to gather research for his latest book.
The book, Breath, is looking at how humans have lost the ability to breathe correctly and why we're suffering from so many chronic problems because of it. And it's really based on finding ways to acknowledge these problems and how to fix them.
Chronic problems like asthma, snoring, sleep apnea, and COPD.
Breathing can often be exacerbating these problems, or in some extraordinary cases, causing these problems. So until you take control of your breathing, until you start breathing properly, you're going to constantly have health issues.
Not just physical health issues, but mental health issues too. Kevin McQueen is the director of respiratory care at UC Health. He says lack of oxygen causes stress on the heart, but the most noticeable impact of poor breathing is anxiety.
People don't always pay attention to how important breathing is and how, when you're not breathing properly, how stressful it is.
Considering we're in the final weeks of the election and in the middle of a pandemic, it's likely a lot of us are feeling more stressed out. However, practicing deep and controlled breathing is scientifically proven to help us feel better.
One thing that you can do is breathe through your nose. Breathe through your nose all the time.
In addition to breathing through your nose, James suggests breathing slowly, deeply, and more lightly. He says that breathing allows us to hack into our nervous system and it relaxes us. Kevin says he tells his patients to focus on square breathing.
I kind of try to teach them to think of a square breath. So they take a breath in, they hold it for a moment, and then they relax and let it go. And by doing that, you can't breathe really fast.
Kevin says fast breathing in our chest can lead to more anxiety and an eventual panic attack with hyperventilation. If you ever find yourself getting to that point, James says you can start counting while you breathe.
If ever you feel yourself becoming anxious or stressed out or your thoughts are scattered, take in a breath to about 4, exhale to about 6 to calm yourself.
But James says the impact of breathing goes beyond anxiety, and his research suggests we should be breathing deeply all the time. He says being aware of our breathing is the first step we can take to a healthier lifestyle.
You can exercise all you want. You can eat the best possible foods. If you are not breathing correctly, you are never going to be healthy.
I'm Elizabeth Ruiz reporting. One foundation in Ohio is trying to help families with loved ones fighting breast cancer. The Karen Wellington Foundation for Living with Breast Cancer helps fulfill the dreams of those in the middle of dealing with the disease. They provide vacations for families to help them still remember the meaning of fun.
From zip lining in Costa Rica to skydiving in your hometown. If it's fun, relaxing, or leaves cancer back at home, Karen's Living Foundation is in.
The foundation says they're about to hit their 1,000th gift for women and families living with cancer. A woman in Colorado is helping to keep the less fortunate warm during the winter months. Barbara Lambright is the founder of the Arvada Mad Hatters. For the past 3 years, Lambright and volunteers have knitted thousands of hats for the needy.
We just want them to know we care about them.
Lambright says her hats are her way to give back to the community. A cancer survivor in Michigan is running 4 full marathons in 24 hours. He and his wife are trying to get people to donate money to help them raise $50,000. The money will be given to organizations to help dogs recover from the abuse they've been subjected to in dogfighting.
We are 100% funded off of the generosity of people like you who are touched by our story and what we do and just want to see these dogs have a better life.